Well, I want to welcome everyone to UCI and to the School of Humanities. I'm Tyrus. I'm the Dean of the School of Humanities. And I'm really delighted to be introducing another of the annual conferences of the Forum for the Academy and the Public. It's always a major event. It's always an intellectually exciting event. And this year, the annual conference has a timely theme of empire resurgent narratives, nationalisms, and new dystopias. There are a lot of weighty concepts that are yoked together in that title, and I know equally that Amy Wilentz and Jeff Wasserstrom, as the organizers of the Forum conference, have assembled a distinguished multidisciplinary group of speakers to address and debate the meaning and the interrelation of these terms and concepts over a global range of examples and focal points. I wanted to offer a somewhat personal and perhaps impressionistic point of view on this topic. While I'm not like Ozymandias, I'm not quite old enough to say I've seen empires come and go. I have had the personal experience of seeing, as an army child living on Okinawa in the early 1970s, some of the remnants of the last great military clash of empires in World War II, overlaid with the tail end of the Vietnam War and an extensive US military presence across Asia and the Pacific, including in Thailand, Japan, Korea, Guam, and the Philippines, the latter of which I have read in the news has just agreed to allowing a return of the US forces that were there in the 1970s and been gone for a while and now back. I also, of course, experienced the events of 1989 to 1991, a consequential turn in the long history of one of the great European and Eurasian continental empires, which for interesting reasons may, for a short time at least, have made questions of empire and imperialism go into a kind of temporary retreat. Something that is implicit in the idea that empire is now resurgent. It had to have, I'm not sure what the opposite of surging is, but retreating in some way. As the tectonic plates of various historical empires and imperial formations shifted even during my lifetime, sometimes indiscernibly, sometimes dramatically, so too I can see on some brief reflection on this, that the theories and discourses about empire and imperialism also shifted considerably. So I would say that when I was a student back in the last century, the concept of imperialism was redolent of the revolutionary legacies of Lenin and Rosa Luxemburg, the national liberation and anti-colonial struggles of the 1950s and 60s, and in a more theoretical vein, the Marxist-oriented world systems and underdevelopment theories associated with such names as Walter Rodney, Samir Amin, Emmanuel Wallerstein, Giovanni Arrighi, and Andre Gunderfrank. In each of these, among others, in each of these, there was a strong identification of imperialism with manifestations of colonialism and continuing neo-colonial dependencies that were above all rooted in the structures of capitalist economies and the capitalist state. A second and distinct set of frames and analyses followed with the reception of post-colonial theories that re-thematized imperialism, highlighting a new dimension of domination, new dimensions of domination and resistance to imperialism through culture, artistic discourse, religion, and diverse forms of everyday practice and violence. The events in Eastern and East Central Europe from 1989 to 1991 might have had the effect of putting a new lens on the question of the historic continental empires. But despite occasional nostalgic looks back on the wonders of the multicultural, multi-ethnic, multilinguistic utopia of the Habsburg Empire, before Central Europe went downhill through certain unfortunate 20th century political developments, I think the end of state socialism in Eastern and Southern Europe had the paradoxical effect of putting the theme of empire somewhat on the back burner, while new frameworks of post-communism, globalization, and neo-nationalism were worked through. The premise of the title, Empire Resurgent, is that empire is today back and perhaps badder than ever. The apparently unthinkable eventuality of a widespread military conflict on the European continent is today more than thinkable. It is present reality. China, which back at the start of my personal narrative, was a fairly insular, mostly regional power that has taken on a still growing global reach, as last year's Forum for the Academy and the Public explored. And the various dimensions of American imperialism, surely never absent during the last several decades, have become increasingly stark. As Dean of the School of Humanities at UCI, I'd be remiss not to note that these issues have been a regular focus of not only our faculty and graduate research conversations, but even of our core undergraduate instruction. The school offers to 800 to 1,000 first-year students from across the campus a 3-quarter multidisciplinary sequence, Humanities Core, which for 3 years carries a common theme. From 2016 to 2019, the Humanities Core sequence bore the title Empire and Its Ruins and included faculty from classics, literary studies, history, and cultural studies to explore with UCI students the imperial motif across time periods and disciplines. I'm delighted to welcome the return of this theme in this exciting setting of the Forum's annual conference, and I know that our audience can look forward to an illuminating set of presentations and discussions this weekend. So with that, I'm going to hand over the podium to Amy Wilentz.
I often have to, when I take this secondary position and someone else has spoken before, I have to revise everything I wrote because they say everything I was going to say. Tyrus did not say anything I was going to say. I mean, we have some similar themes, but I'm so glad everyone's here today. Thank you all for coming, including our panelists, participants, keynote speaker. We're sitting in a very nice classroom, and I was thinking about it. Everybody's now signing an apology at the end of their letters at UCI about the indigenous populations whose land we're on, so I just wanted to make a shout out to the Akjachimin and Tongva peoples on whose land we are, because I thought it was relevant to the topic of imperialism here. And so I think it gets us situated for this conference. And I think, aren't we comfortable here? And in general, aren't we comfortable in the world we live in that was built by imperialism? Many of us are. I'm just going to say a few words about imperialism in my area of study, Haiti. Because aside from what's happening in Ukraine and battles over Chinese balloons, Haiti is what made me think of this event's subject, along with my colleague Jeff Wasserstrom, who helped found the forum and helped organize this event today. When I first got to Haiti, I was very ill-educated and very stupid and thought it was just another Caribbean nation, but poorer than the other ones, and I didn't really have much of an analysis. And later I realized that 2 centuries before I arrived, Haiti had been what one could call at this particular historical moment an early Ukraine, a place where the battles over imperial hegemony could take place, where proxy generals and allies could be culled from the changing population of the island, and where an enormous continent lurking not far away would be won or lost with all it could provide to the conquering power. So France, Spain, and England were jousting for Haiti's riches. Germany stuck its head into the hurly-burly, and Haiti was a microcosm for the wars being prosecuted on the European continent itself. And so the battle was waged. During the Haitian Revolution, which ended with the declaration of the Free Haitian Republic in 1804, much was won for Haiti, but much lost. Freedom was purchased with the blood of many who might have been able leaders of the young republic. The Haitian economy, as Americans now know, thanks to the New York Times, was taken hostage by the former powers who used the island as a distant stage on which to enact their European enmities. And a ransom was exacted into the billions of today's dollars. So not until 1948 could the formerly enslaved population pay back the huge sums demanded by the great powers to ensure the free people of Haiti their continuing liberty. So for half a century, the island's economic energies were wasted in paying this bill to the great imperial powers, France most notably. And before that, for 2 centuries, all the unpaid labor and energies of the population had been spent tilling the fruitful land, with all the riches from their work going to build the cities we know and love today as, for example, Paris. When you next visit Paris and you look at the broad, clean boulevards and beautiful 18th and 19th century buildings, please remember the work and blood of African origin enslaved people that was spent and spilled building our great city of lights. Merci la France. Again, many times Haiti was made a plaything in the games of the white man and his white empires. And after the 2010 earthquake, we saw again in a new guise how imperialism comes to weaker states. Much was promised to Haitians to build back better, that cynical slogan. But the monies that were provided in the aftermath of the quake were shared primarily by foreign contractors and huge not-for-profit rescue, relief, and reconstruction institutions. I watched as the United States and the United Nations and the Red Cross neglected and in some cases abandoned the Haitian people to their post-earthquake fate. But one of the reasons for my talking about Haiti is because it's not alone. Empire is something all the people of the world contend with every day in its form of new nationalisms, new imperial borders, and the globalization of not just military power, but important supranational institutions like technology, homeland security, finance, etc. Tonight, I wanted to talk, just to be fair and to give him credit, I want to say a few words about the artist who painted the beautiful image that we've used for this year's conference. You can see it in various places. I can see it in front of me, but I don't know how to use the machine well enough to put it up for you. His name is Edouard Duval-Carrier, and he is an internationally known and much exhibited artist. I've known him and his family for more than 3 decades. Edouard has been thinking about empire for a long time, as most Haitians have. He's used his enormous gifts to give us a version of Haiti that is political and global and verging on the mythological. The image we chose for the Empire Conference shows Erzulie, the goddess of love and of maternity in Haitian Vodou, crying like La Llorona as she descends barefoot from an American ship. You can't tell if it's a hospital ship with a red cross on the guards' helmets, or is it a military ship? We don't know. It was painted in 1996 and commemorates the travails of Haitian migrants. But after the 2010 earthquake, it was brought back as an image of foreign helpers not helping. For our purposes for this event, we were interested in the way it showed a beautiful, intricate, complicated cultural symbol of Haiti under the harsh, uncaring control of an outside dominant military. So now, getting to most important things, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, who has thought long and hard about such issues, and to introduce the moderator of our keynote response panel, another dissector of empire. Leah Upi, today's keynote speaker, is a professor of political theory at the London School of Economics. She also has advanced degrees in philosophy and journalism. So I'm kind of flattered. Albanian born, she grew up during the final years of the Enver Hoxha regime, which ended with the dictator's death in 1985, when Albania began experiencing the kind of freedom that the end of authoritarian communist rule and the advent of capitalism would bring to the country. I was lucky enough to read Upi's striking and now prize-winning 2021 memoir, Free, Coming of Age at the End of History, in manuscript as I sat by the side of the Southern California swimming pool. I have to say it was the most astonishing intellectual and literary experience I have ever had by the side of the pool. Although it's beautifully written and a well-observed memoir of coming of age, it is also an astute meditation on different kinds of freedom and unfreedom, and how we live under them, and on the broad European political scene in the post-Cold War era. We're so honored to have her speak here tonight, and I will preview him. Moderating our panel, responding to Leah's remarks, is the illustrious Berkeley journalist, historian, and author, Adam Hochschild, who wrote, among many other books, King Leopold's Ghost, A Story of Greed, Terror, and Heroism in Colonial Africa. Adam's central concerns as a person and a writer have long been human rights and social justice. From my own experience, I can say he is a force for good, for humankind, and one of the great Americans living today. I'm grateful that he agreed to come down from California north to visit with us. Thanks, Leah and Adam, and Leah, will you take the stand, as we say?